There's the pass to Leitner. Puts it up. Yes!
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Chronicles. Max here. To my right, we've got Micah Hurewitz, and to my left, we've got Jonathan Levitan, our two assistant Blue Zone editors and fellow men's basketball beats. They're joining me on this Sunday to break down Duke's latest 3-game win streak to start the season, including the game last night against Campbell. Guys, thanks for joining today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having me as well.
All right, let's cut right to the chase. So 3 games in for Duke, and we're starting to learn a little bit about these Blue Devils. An impressive win over Kentucky on Tuesday, Wendell Moore dropping a triple-double against Army Friday night, and a dicey win over Campbell last night from the Big South. So I'll kick it over to you guys. You guys were on the coverage last night in Cameron Indoor for the Campbell game. Obviously a lot to talk about, the Wendell Moore injury scare, small ball lineup. Micah, what's your first takeaway from last night?
I mean, really, how the game got started, it was a lot of, tense fans in Cameron behind us. Obviously a lot of things still to work out for this team. I think, they fell behind 18-8 pretty early on. That was mostly in part, due to rebounding, 3-point shooting on Campbell's side. But how Campbell really came out there with 4 or 5 guards just to start the game. They had Jesus Carolero. He had picked up 2 fouls pretty early on, and then it was pretty much 5 guards for the rest of the first half, and Campbell was able to, hang with Duke, keep their lead. But, I mean, it really did take some time for Duke to figure out what they needed to do, and I think that definitely, showed some tension on the Duke bench. There's obviously still just a lot to work out with this team.
Jonathan, any takeaways?
I think the biggest thing from last night, for the second straight night actually, was Wendell Moore Jr. Wendell was fantastic after going out early, which was terrifying for everybody. I know he said he thought he was going to play right away, but Coach K admitted it after the game that he was scared. He thought it was long-term, so they got away with one there, but he came right back into the game. It was like he didn't miss a beat. It's pretty obvious that he's what makes this team tick. Even if he's not their best player, he's probably the most important player. The second he went out, they didn't look great on offense. They didn't look great on defense. I'm sure they would have figured it out. They're a good enough team too, but they look so much better with him on the court, even when he's not out there dropping a triple-double. That's my biggest thing. I know we'll get into talking about small ball a little bit more, but another thing that excited me about last night, I know that there's a lot of things not to be excited about because it wasn't their cleanest performance, but they do have the personnel to adjust. They're a team that thinks they have one of the best front lines in the country, and even if they didn't show it last night, they probably still do. But they also have the personnel to be like, okay, we're playing a team that's going to field a veteran lineup of pretty much all guards and maybe one bigger guy. Let's go to a lineup that just surrounds Paolo Banchero with 4 smaller guys who can shoot the ball. And not a lot of teams have that luxury, even a lot of teams like in the top 10. They are way deeper than we realize, and that's pretty special this early on in the season.
And I think sorry to interrupt, but I think the biggest thing for Duke last night in terms of, really executing with that lineup was the fact that their 3-point shooting really, really got going, and there's no one more that contributed to that than Joey Baker off the bench. I'll hand it back over to you, Matt.
Yeah, I was just going to say that point about Wendell is a key one. I think I don't think he's the Duke's best player. That's Paolo. He's the number 4 recruit in the country, according to ESPN, even higher in some places. He's going to be the guy that scores the most points most nights. I mean, he's averaging, I'm looking at now, 19 and 9, and I don't even think he's had his A game yet. And I don't think he'll say he's had his A game. I mean, he looked great against Kentucky, but he cramped up and he missed key stretches of that game in the second half. And he's still at 22 and 7. So it's absurd, like how talented and how smooth he is. It's ridiculous watching him play. It's like this guy could start on an NBA roster right now. But Wendell, he's averaging 15, 6, and 6. And so he's second on the team in points. He's second in rebounds, ahead of Mark Williams. That's that's a little bit due to his minutes, but still. And he leads the team in assists, and it's not that close. Trevor Keels and Jeremy Roach. Roach is second with 3, and Trevor Keels is third at 2.3. So I think he's just the engine for this team. He attacks well off the dribble. He gets them out in transition. He gets them organized in the half court. And you really saw that last night when he went down. Quite frankly, I was not at the game, but I was definitely worried for Duke. I thought they would be in trouble a little bit without him because I just know how important he is to this team and how important he is to their psyche because he's a 3-year player. And Coach K talked about it. That's an older Campbell team. That's a Big South favorite. And they were able to roll out a lineup filled with older, experienced guards, and they were able to attack Duke off the dribble and create mismatches, and that's what forced Coach K to go to a smaller lineup. So that's got to be the takeaway, so we won't belabor the point any longer. We got to talk about the small ball lineup, because I thought they would go to it a little bit this season. I wanted to put it as my best lineup. I was talked out of it for a lot of reasons, which we can go. We don't have to relitigate that, but they obviously went to the small ball lineup for a lot of the second half. They started out with Joey Baker in place of Mark Williams, and Mark didn't even play for the entire second half. He only had 6 minutes, which I thought was a massive takeaway. And whether that's going to be sustainable the rest of the season, probably not. But against a team like Campbell that has basically 4 guards, then I think they had to do it. So, Jonathan, just initial takeaways on the small ball lineup, whether you think Coach K will keep going to it.
Yeah, well, I think the question is whether it's going to be a staple or a rarity, and I'm hesitant to go either way with it. But what I have to remind myself is that this is a team where the coaching staff thinks they have, I think I already said it, they think they have one of the best front lines in the country. And they have the personnel to do that. They are really big, and not a lot of teams are that big in college. But at the same time, they looked better last night running things the way they did, and maybe that was a matchup thing, but it really feels like Banchero, who is their best player, I think that's pretty clear, is at his best on offense when he's playing the 5, not the 4. And even though there's this great idea that Coach K has talked about where you surround Mark Williams, who obviously didn't play much last night, with 4 ball handlers, because Banchero can handle the ball, and all 3 of those guys, Moore, Roach, Keels, can handle the ball. They can shoot. They can really make space for Banchero on the inside. Like, there's a lot of opportunity there. I don't think they'll go back to it very much soon, to be honest. I think that Coach K was pretty clear that was a matchup thing last night, and I don't think he was making that up. But Mark Williams is a second-team preseason All-ACC selection. He's a really good player. He was arguably their best player at the end of the season last season. And that's just the way it is with the big man. Sometimes the matchup is not going to work out. And, yeah, that's my takeaway there.
And then, I think, as Jonathan said, that it was really a matchup thing. Coach K emphasized that post-game. But, the ACC is a conference that has, some pretty talented big men and also some pretty talented shooters. And depending on what kinds of lineups, teams Duke plays down the line, put out against them, Duke might be putting out this small ball lineup some more. Whether that's just to try to get back into a game or really, build up an early lead against one of those really strong shooting teams. But, I think that in order for this small ball lineup to really work, I want to see some better decision-making with the ball from Banchero. I know a lot of people have been saying that he looks really smooth with the ball in his hands, but he did have 5 turnovers and no assists in last night's game. And, seeing him kind of careless with the ball, trying to make some flashy passes out of the post, try to get it outside. He has the right idea, but, the execution wasn't fully there. And, if they can, iron out those wrinkles, then I think that small ball lineup can become a go-to lineup for this team. But, for now it's a matchup thing. It's not there yet, and I'm looking forward to seeing Mark and Theo, back in getting 15-20 minutes against, their next couple opponents.
Yeah, a couple things I thought for me is they look like they're trying to speed up the pace with this lineup, because I think I'm looking here, they're 153rd in adjusted tempo, according to our friends over at KenPom. He obviously does a great job with all the analytics. Shout out to some people who don't like analytics. Not going to name names. But they're 153rd there, and they obviously want to speed up the pace because they have they can have a lineup of 4 shooters plus Paolo. And he obviously is not a terrible shooter. I know he's had a couple air balls, which might be a little cause for concern, but we're not going to talk about that yet. But they definitely want to speed up the pace. And also just the fact that I think they're trying to get Joey Baker open looks. They're trying to give him confidence because I think it's very clear last year just kind of killed a lot of his confidence, and he was just not shooting the ball well, and he was getting slightly less open looks because with a team built around Matthew Hurt, you're not going to get as many open looks versus having Trey Jones, who's driving and kicking and burning carry, who's getting doubled in the post. I mean, Joey Baker and Alex O'Connell, I can't even can't even tell you how many wide open threes, like literally no one around them, because Vernon Carey's having 20 and 10, you have to double and even triple team him, and Trey driving to the basket. I mean, it's just so different. And this year's a little more similar to that with Paolo. I mean, they're not giving to him in the post as much as I would like to see. I think they gave it to him a little more last night because he was against Army. He's literally calling for the ball. He's like, give me the ball to Roach and Moore. And they gave it to him a little bit more last night. So I think that, and they're trying to get Baker some open looks. And he played well last night. He had 11 points, and he had 5 rebounds, which is kind of, I saw one tweet that said that's the exact stat line. 3 threes, 5 rebounds, 11 points. That's the exact stat line that you want. It's the exact performance that you want from Joey Baker because if he fills his role, then Duke has Theo John, Joey Baker. Right now, AJ Griffin can be considered a role player. I don't think he will be for much longer. I think he's going to take on a bigger role. And Jalen Blakes, I was going to say he looks good. I mean, I think this is part of the rehab process for AJ is playing and getting involved in the offense. And I still feel like he needs to be reintegrated more in the offense. I feel like he's playing off of everyone right now. Like he's spotting up in the corner and attacking off the dribble.
He's the best athlete on this team, and I'm excited to see it. Yeah,
he is the best athlete. I just think he needs to be. I think they should use him more as like a screener, and he needs to cut a little bit more. He had one good cut against Kentucky. I believe was an assist by John in the second half, from what I remember, and Coach K talked about how AJ gave him a huge spark against Kentucky, and he is going to be that spark plug guy, I think, for a few more games. I think against Gonzaga, which we'll see that game in a little over 2 weeks, basically, from now. Friday, November 25th. Is that correct? 26th?
It's that Friday.
Yeah, God. Thanksgiving, 25th, 26th, tomato. But, so we'll see that, and I think that'll be the game that AJ really has to take a step forward because Gonzaga has Hunter Salas and Nolan Hickman and guys who can wings who can take their man off the dribble. I think AJ's going to have to step up on both ends for that. But I think we got into a little tangent there about AJ. But one last takeaway from Campbell, and then we can move on to some of the other games from the week. But I know people love to talk about Big 2, Big 3, but unironically, I think we have to talk about the fact that there's a Big 3 on this team. I think people thought that it might have been just with some different guys. I still think it could be different come February, come ACC play, which might be a little different for Duke this year because, again, I think the ACC is probably a little down this year. Probably a little better than last year, but some teams losing early. I mean, Virginia lost to Navy. Miami lost.
Louisville lost.
Yeah, Pittsburgh. I mean, Pittsburgh is rebuilding it after losing Justin Champagny. But, yeah, the ACC is not very good, and I think Duke might be able to experiment a little more. So we could still see some, this sort of lineup combination, small ball. Because it's definitely, the ACC is not, it's not the Big Ten. It's definitely not the Big Ten. It's not the Big 12, I would say. It's not even the SEC, and it might end up being as good as the SEC or the Pac-12. I think it's probably better than the Pac-12 because the Pac-12 is just UCLA. Shout out to Bill Walton, but so guys.
Oregon too.
Yeah, Oregon. Oregon always makes a run in the tournament. So yeah, Jonathan, just your takeaways on there being a potential Big 3 with this team.
I agree. And I think you probably are referring to Paolo, who's their best player.
Correct.
Wendell, who is their most important player.
Correct.
And Keels, who is probably going to be the guy all season who doesn't get as much credit as he deserves, even though he is the third guy there.
Correct.
And yeah, I agree. I think there's other really good players. Roach has been really good the last few days. He was my pick for player of the game yesterday. He missed out a little bit on our Twitter poll after the game. Show him some love next time. But I do think that those three guys are going to be the most important pretty much throughout the season. I still have high expectations for Mark Williams. I always have. And I hope he becomes a bigger part of their plans down the line, as long as they figure out their rotations with those three big men. But my biggest question with that big three right now, and I think I hinted at it a little bit just now, is that Wendell has his role, Paolo has his role. Where does Keels fit into the equation? Because he was a revelation against Kentucky. He was great, offensively and defensively.
He's been kind of gone since then.
Yeah,
in terms of shooting,
at least offensively.
Yeah.
But it's what you might not be looking for. He's still been really good. Like against Army the other night, he came out shooting. He made the first three of the game. He actually did that back-to-back nights, which is interesting. He's a good early game offensive player. But then he shot poorly that night. He shot 4 of 14. Last night he made only 2 shots, had 6 points. They're both threes though. But he draws fouls. He makes life hard on the other team, whether he has the ball or whether he doesn't. He's so big. He's so strong. Plays such good defense. He basically made Ty Washington, who people are so excited about in Kentucky, a non-factor the other night. He's the real deal, and he's the reason they have a big three.
I totally agree with you in terms of the difference that Trevor Keels has made on the floor for this Duke team so far. Obviously, those 25 points against Kentucky were huge. But, the last 2 games at home, it's been more of Roach for me in terms of, big three. I know he and Wendell kind of, Wendell is a pseudo point guard kind of. He's been taking the ball up the court and obviously has a whole lot of assists. But, in terms of just overall effectiveness and contributions to this team, at least offensively, I got to say my big three is Paolo, Wendell, and Jeremy there. But in terms of defense, I still got to give credit to Trevor Keels, who I believe was guarding Jordan Whitfield last night, who
played the entire game.
He played the entire game and held him to 1 of 10 shooting. I mean, that kind of defensive effort is, can't find that really anywhere else.
Yeah, he missed all of his threes.
Yeah, so really good stuff from Keels there.
Yeah, I mean, Roach and Keels have looked really good defensively. I was impressed with Roach's defensive chops, especially in man-to-man situations late last year. I thought he improved in that as the season went on and became a better spot-up shooter as the season went on, and I think that's continued. I think he definitely learned a lot from Jordan Goldwire, which shout out to Jay Gold. He's doing pretty well at Oklahoma. He's filling his role, so we love him. One of my favorite all-time Duke players since I've been here. Not all-time, because he's not like JJ Redick good, obviously, but he's one of my favorite role players since I've been here. I've only been here for 3 years, so one of my favorite role players in the last couple of years. But yeah, Jeremy has looked pretty good defensively. I think he looks good on screens, and he's funneling his guy to the help man, which is always important for a point guard, especially someone who Duke's been dealing with teams that use a lot of ball screen action, which they might not see that every game, but they're definitely been dealing with it so far. One thing about this big three, I think the stats kind of bear it out. In terms of box plus minus, which is obviously a measure of how many points a player contributes per 100 possessions, Paolo, Wendell, and Trevor Keels are the top 3 among guys who play legitimate. Actually,
the top 3 on Duke, or
the top 3 on Duke, not the top 3 in the country.
I'm not surprised by that.
Yeah,
the
I'm
top
just
3.
Clarifying.
Top 3 on Duke. It's Wendell Moore with 11.6, Paolo with 9.1, and Keels with 6.8. that's actually not the best in terms of overall on the team. The best is Bates Jones, which I think is completely hilarious because I like Bates Jones. I think he's impressed me a little more because I think he's a better shooter than maybe I gave him credit for.
He has not missed a shot this year.
Hey, we gotta say, he stepped onto the court against Army and nailed a 3 within the first 30 seconds.
Exactly. He's a floor spacer. He's like they consider him like what they consider Joey Baker to be, just in a bigger man's body, kind of.
Yeah.
But yeah, the stats bear it out. That's kind of the big three. The usage rating is similar. Usage rating is 27 for Paolo, 23 for Wendell, 24 for Trevor. Jeremy coming in at 17.5, and Jalen Blake's at 20, which I'm assuming that just means because he's with the bench. He's starting with the bench and he's handling the ball. But yeah, the stats bear it out. That's their big three right now. I think Roach is probably that fourth guy, and they'll figure it out with Mark. They got to tinker with their lineups, and they just have to. I mean, I think when you have two guys that can play the same position, like Paolo and Mark, Paolo can play the five, and I think one thing that stands out to me about this kind of situation is when you have two guys that play kind of the same position, you just play them and let them figure it out. They can play off each other pretty well. I think there's an old documentary that John Calipari has that quote where he was trying to figure out John Wall and Eric Bledsoe. Like, they were the same position. He's like, people ask me, like, how do I figure that out? I play them. Like, I play them and let them figure it out. And Coach K has talked about how they're a young team. He wants them to figure it out on the fly, and he'll adjust and he'll tinker, but he wants them to take ownership. And he's been with this team so much in the summer that he really feels it in tune to what they want to do and how they want to play, and he has a good feel. I think he has a very good feel for this team, which I know is kind of a sports talk radio-y thing to say, feel and whatnot. But I think he is locked into what this team wants to do. So yeah, and then we talked a little bit about Campbell, which if they had won by 30, we probably wouldn't have been talking about it. But they only won by 11, so we have to talk about it. And the fact that they didn't play Mark for 20 minutes is notable. So,
but at least we have the 21-point turnaround that we can credit to that small ball lineup, and that's huge.
Downtown won by 11.
Yeah. I was interested in seeing how the small ball lineup looked, and I thought, look, getting it to Paolo in the post and letting guys cut and spot up off of him was interesting, because that's honestly, like, Coach K, Paolo talked about this a little bit in a great feature written about him in The Athletic, but Coach K would send him videos about like other NBA players, like how they were used, and like showing videos of LeBron playing as like a point center out of the post, and Coach K would say, like, this is how we're gonna play you. And I thought that kind of showed last night, where they would give it to him in the post, and he's a great passer. He's got a great feel for the game. He's got a great understanding of where guys are supposed to be and where guys are going to be. Like, he can deliver a skip pass from the left block to the right wing. So he's got a really natural feel for the game, and I think playing him at the 5, to give time for Mark to figure it out, I say do it. I think you got to do it, and I would consider it against Gonzaga. I think you try against Gonzaga. You maybe try to play one of Holmgren or Timmy off the floor. Probably Timmy, because Holmgren's a very good defender. And Timmy's gonna be the guy that you're gonna have to limit, because he's literally the National Player of the Year. And last night against Texas, I don't know if you're listening to this, maybe you didn't watch the game, but watch the highlights. It's a masterclass in footwork, and post game. So yeah, we're moving on a little bit here to the first game of the year, Kentucky. Big win. I was there with our sports editor Jake Piazza at Madison Square Garden. Unbelievable atmosphere, unbelievable game. Two great teams. Two teams that I think the teams that showed up Tuesday night. Duke maybe didn't show it last night. They showed it a little bit against Army, but that Duke team along with the Kentucky team that showed up Tuesday night, those are both Final Four level teams. If we see them in New Orleans, I will not be surprised, and I will be the happiest man on the planet, because getting Duke Kentucky in the Final Four would be the most ridiculous thing of all time in recent NCAA tournament history, because those are two of the 3 or 4 best programs ever, and 2 of the best coaches in the game right now. But So guys, Mike, I'll kick it over to you. But your first takeaway, my first takeaway from Kentucky has to be Trevor Keels and that performance at 25 and him taking over when Paolo went down with cramps. But anything different?
Hey man, I mean, call me a pessimist, but rebounding. I couldn't take my eyes off of like just where guys were playing and boxing out. Sure, Trevor Keels had a great game, really propelled them to that win, but it's mind-boggling how they were able to pull that one out, giving up as many rebounds and second chances as they were. 19 offensive rebounds for Kentucky, only 8 for Duke in terms of just keeping possession. Mark Williams, Theo John, Paolo Banchero, their rebounding has not been very good this year. I'm just gonna say it. I think that's carried through all 3 of the games so far. So in terms of takeaways from that one, I was really happy to see Trevor Keels come out in his first game, but rebounding. That's got to be the focus for Duke. Next couple games before they get to that Gonzaga team, I think they really got to work that out.
If I can echo that for a second, the first part of that, the offensive rebounding was a problem, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that Duke can have so much size down low and even on the bench so much size to have the luxury of a 6'10", 250-pound Theo John to come off the bench for you and still be unable to reel in Kentucky. They had 19 offensive rebounds last night. I don't want to talk about last night anymore right now, but Campbell had a lot of offensive rebounds. They had a point where they hit a 3 on their 4th chance at one point. But it's all about their defensive positioning, and I think it carries through to a little bit more than just rebounding. Coach K talked about it in his press conference after last night's win about how they're all crowding around the rim every time the ball goes up, and there's something to be said for that. They're beating their opponents there, but sometimes it's not enough to just beat your opponent to the ball. You have to be in the right spot at the right time. I think that's going to help them both on offense and defense, and they have been the younger team in most of these games. They've been playing veteran squads, even if Kentucky was cobbled together with transfers. But it's going to take time for that to mesh. That's my biggest takeaway from the Kentucky game, is that they are a really good basketball team, and they still didn't do everything right. And they got away with a win under the bright lights at Madison Square Garden over a really good top 10 team with so much talent. And it was not perfect. There were even conditioning problems. There were players in and out of the game getting IV drips because they couldn't stay out there any longer.
4 players.
Including
Paolo and Wendell. Yeah, that's what Coach K said in the presser after it and on Tuesday night. 4 players. Paolo had to get an IV as well. So keep going, continue.
That'll come. But I think the biggest takeaway is that they are not a finished product by any means. And in the year of the super senior, they're going to play a lot of teams who have veteran squads, and they're going to need to get older and tougher and stronger and more mentally in there. I know they want to win right now, but it's going to take time, and I'm so excited about this team, and I think most of us here are. I think it's one of the better Duke teams in a while, but we have to be patient.
And before we move on, I just want to also throw out there, since we were just talking about rebounding for a while, 3-point shooting has got to improve. They've got to step up from behind the arc if this really is going to become a really potent team. I mean, we already covered, how they have really talented bigs that can score it inside. They can play defense inside as well. But if Duke really wants to be that, top 10 Final Four team that it knows it can be, then it's got to be hitting threes at a more consistent rate. And we're seeing a little bit of that as the games roll on, going from 1 for 12 to 9 for 29 to 9 for 23. For that Campbell game, they were up to 39% from 3. Duke fans will take that any day.
That's great, yeah.
But that's got to be a really consistent part of their game plan moving forward.
Yeah, and that wasn't the case against Kentucky. They only hit 1 3. They were 1 of 13. They only took 4 in the second half because they had Keels and Paolo going to the hole. I mean, Keels attacking off the dribble, Paolo getting active in the mid-range game. He had two plays that from Paolo that stand out to me. This is going to be just we might as well rename this the Paolo podcast in like 2 weeks, because 2 plays that stand out to me from Paolo were the 2 mid-range jumpers where I think Billis said they would just exit the left side and it was an open side elbow look, and he shot right over. I believe it might have been Keon Brooks. I'm not entirely sure.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Either him or Damian Collins.
Yeah, well, Collins didn't play very much at all against Duke. I don't even think he played
a minute 25.
Yeah, I was gonna say he
Really?
didn't play at all, barely. Yeah, it was interesting. Seth Davis noted that during Kentucky's game against I forget who they played a couple of days ago, but they played a cupcake, and Collins had 3 tomahawk dunks, and he was like, and Seth tweeted like, this guy didn't even play against Duke. He could have definitely helped them, but. Yeah, so Paolo he played Keon Brooks off the floor. Like, Brooks was unplayable.
He was bad.
Yeah, and it was against, Robert Morris. Shout out to Rob Morris. But, and that just really stood out to me about that game. Because Paolo, again, he had cramps. He, was in and out of the game in the second half. Probably couldn't keep his rhythm, and he still had 22 and 7. And then, we talked about it, but Keels, that was his coming out party. Bright lights, Madison Square Garden, New York City. It was loud there, and it was I thought it looked. I was in the upper deck, the nosebleeds for the second half, which was actually a great view of the whole court. And Kentucky looked really good at the start of the second half. They were down 4 going to halftime, and I thought Duke was going to pull away early because they had only hit 1 3 and they were being out-rebounded, and they were still winning by 4 at the half. So I remember telling Jake when we were flipping seats that I think Duke's going to probably pull away here. But Kentucky came out, and Oscar Tshiebwe was ridiculous. I think I called him incorrigible in my sidebar.
He
after
did.
That game.
I loved that.
But that was an absurd performance, and the stat correction actually gave him 20 rebounds. So, and he said he had another 20 rebounds against Robert Moore. So he's literally averaging 20 rebounds. But Duke, they didn't get off to a great start in the second half, but then it was the Keels show. He was so good in the pick and roll, and he was so good with Theo John. John set some great screens and had the one roll where Keels went to the foul line, looked like he was going to pull up, and then just dished it off to John. The whole defense shifted up to him, and John was wide open for a dunk. So he was, for a guy who's technically a 2 guard, they're very interchangeable. This is a positionless team. Coach K said that we're a very versatile team, and a lot of broadcasters, I believe Carlos Boozer mentioned to Jake, who was at his media availability, that this is one of Coach K's most athletic teams that he's ever had in his career, which is obviously a long career, and he's had some very athletic teams. I think 2001 stands out in that regard, but I think being able to have a guy like Keels who can play the point and have Roach.
Keels can play out of the post. He can make post shots.
That was when he was being guarded by Severe Wheeler, who's 5'10". But
hey.
To be fair, yeah, I get what you're saying. But
Who played a really good game? Wheeler was really good.
He's just a total stud. He's the engine for that team. But yeah, Keels was awesome. That was an insanely good performance considering it was his first. He only had 1 exhibition, 1 scrimmage, and against Villanova, and then one countdown scrimmage, which is more so just a show off opportunity, and so Coach K can tinker with lineups and get the first team against the second team to go against each other. But yeah, those are my 2 key takeaways was Keels and Theo John. I knew he would be a good role player, and I think he's tough. He can rebound. He can run the floor. He's a good screen setter, but he did all of that times 2 or 3 for me, and he looked great, and he looked like a guy who can play. I thought he would play 14, 15 minutes a night. I think he can play in the 20-minute range without instilling a lot of worry in Duke fans. Why is he playing? Isn't he supposed to be coming off the bench? Isn't he? He's a grad transfer.
I think it could be he and if Mark kind of starts showing up, I think it could be Theo John and Mark Williams just splitting time. Coming on and off every 4 or 5 minutes.
That was interesting last night, though, because they went to, I know you were interested in this, they went to Theo over Mark in the second half. If they are going to run small ball, we're going to see a lot of Theo just because he has the ability to, stick on those guards. He has the
I mean,
ability to
his
set a monster
experience-
screen. Yeah,
His
he's
experience
a man.
really stands out.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah, him and Armando Bacot with the two photos before the season. So many people are saying that those photos were doctored.
Many people.
Who knows? I know Duke fans were accusing UNC of photoshopping their Armando one, and UNC fans were accusing Duke.
I think Theo's legit.
Okay, well, we can't say one is legit and one is not. But and Theo John, I was a big fan of him coming into the year, and I'm an even bigger fan of him now. I still think obviously Mark Williams is still going to get the lion's share of the minutes at center, as he should, but I think John is a key role player, and I think John Rothstein said that he could be like a Brian Zubek type guy for this team, which I thought was a really good comparison. Because this team does need a little more offensive rebounding, and what that Duke team basically won a national championship off of was Zubek and Lance Thomas rebounding, and then relocating shooters on the outside. I mean, they had Shire, which he's here right now, so he probably has some experience with some good offensive rebounding bigs. But Shire, Nolan Smith, and Kyle Singler are all good shooters, and Andre Dawkins, who's on that team. So, yeah, that may not be the exact formula because this team doesn't quite have the shooters, but John still can be a guy who can get extra possessions and scrap and fight for boards and fight for loose balls. So he did get that one flagrant foul against Army, which I have to look. I saw the play. I was there on Friday night against Army, but I didn't really see it look like a hook and hold, what they called. But that may happen a couple times because John is just always active and around the ball and around the play. And I don't think that shows he's a dirty player per se. I just think it shows he's always going to be active, and maybe he's going to have to reel it back in. But I don't even know if they want him to. So he probably won't. He's not going to get a lot of flagrant fouls. He's not like I'm trying to think of a dirty player in the NBA. He's not like, he doesn't. I'm a big Draymond Green fan for how he plays for the Warriors, but he was at one point he was a dirty player, kicking guys in the nuts. So, but yeah, he's not that type of guy. So I feel like. So,
I just think that it's a luxury to have him off the bench.
I agree.
If he really is that third big, then he doesn't have to. He got in so much foul trouble at Marquette. That was probably his biggest shortcoming. He doesn't have to worry about that here. He can go out on the court and he can play hard. He can go for that block. He can go hard in the paint. And if he picks up a couple fouls, so be it. There's two other really talented bigs who are probably going to see more floor time than him anyways when all is said and done. And so if that's his playing style, where he just plays hard and he does pick up those fouls, which we haven't really seen so far, that's okay.
Yeah, well, his role is a little different with this team than it was with Marquette. He still can be a rim protector, but he has been. Coach K has talked about how he's been impressive in pick and roll defense a little bit, and he's kind of compared that to Williams, who Williams still needs to kind of learn how to play in the pick and roll defensively a little bit. And that's my kind of take of it, but that's also, Coach K.
I agree.
Coach K has literally said it. So yeah, and I think John is going to be a huge piece for this team, and it's weird that this turned into a Theo John discussion, but I think he has been impressive.
Absolutely.
Before this is getting into a long podcast. I think we're at 30 minutes now, but we obviously haven't really talked a lot about the Army game, which for a lot of reasons was probably I was very excited for that game, and it was a great atmosphere Friday night in Cameron, and it was a great performance by Wendell Moore. And with it being Army, I thought that was such a nice tribute. Veterans Day, Veterans Week. I guess Veterans Day was Thursday. So they played really well, and obviously having our one of our recent guests, Chris Patola, he was on the call this weekend, and he wanted to call the Army game. He obviously played at Army, and I remember him telling me that he was excited to call that game, and he got it. So probably wasn't. He wanted the Army to keep it close as an alum, but they kept it close for a bit. We have to talk. We got to talk about the Wendell Moore triple double. That's the 5th in program history, the first since R.J. Barrett in 2019, obviously. So what are your guys' takeaways? Fire away. 19, 10, and 10. He looked completely in control, and besides, I thought he played well against Kentucky, and I thought he showed his value last night against Campbell versus when he was off the floor and when he came back and spearheaded that small ball lineup to a comeback. But his best game was Army. He obviously had a triple double. So, what are your guys' takeaways off that?
I think what actually stood out to me the most is that I didn't even notice that he was on his way to a triple double. The fact that he was able to do that so seamlessly and not look like he was, padding his stats or whatever. I know that's not really as much a thing in college basketball, but
are you taking a shot at people? Are you
potentially
taking a shot at Russell Westbrook?
I'm not saying anything here.
That's disgusting.
But he's not trying to pass the ball to be flashy. He's just being part of the offense, and the fact that for most of that game it was Banchero would inbound it and Moore's at half court full steam ahead within a second, just trying to get the offense fast. He was really good with the ball in his hands. The rebounds, they come, the assists, I think that's really a tribute to his ability to really initiate the offense, find the open guys, really make the smart passes. And, throughout that game, it was just consistent. He played a lot of minutes. I don't know exactly what his time on the floor was like, but, just the fact that it was so seamless, I think really, really made me, comfortable with him as kind of that point guard position for this team.
Yeah, I think you're right. He dominated the ball the entire game.
Yeah. Which
maybe isn't something we expected coming into the year, but maybe it's something we should have. He's the most experienced of those three guys between him, Roach, and Keels, who are going to be those primary ball handlers. But what stood out was that he played mistake-free basketball, pretty much. 10 assists and 1 turnover. It's a career high in assists, and really not even giving the ball away pretty much at all. To be on the ball for the better part of 35 minutes and to take care of it and to play at that high of a level is something that you don't see in a lot of college players.
Yeah.
And when we talk about this team needing time to grow into themselves, I think that's true, but I think what we're seeing right now is that Wendell Moore is, and to an extent already has, grown into himself over this summer. And after what was really a pretty trying pair of 2 seasons for him at Duke, it's obviously great for him to see him do it, and it's great for Duke to see him play at that level.
He always showed flashes, right? He had, everyone points to the UNC, the putback, but he had a great game against UNC. He had close to 20 points, I believe. And that was kind of the start of maybe maybe Wendell's gonna take on this role of being a do everything forward. And he showed it at times. He showed it against Wake Forest his freshman year as well, which was actually the late season Wake Forest game, the road game, which they actually lost, I remember. But he showed it in the second half of last year. He just hasn't put it together for a full season, and he obviously sometimes hadn't put it together for a full 40 minutes. And this year, his per 40 minutes is 18, 7.5 rebounds, and 7 assists, 2 steals, which he's only shooting 29% from 3. That'll come. He's never been a great shooter. He'll never be a 38% shooter, I don't think, but he's a good shooter. He can shoot it. And he's shooting 68% from 2. Which is completely ridiculous.
Is that a real stat?
Per 40 minutes, yeah.
Well,
I think that's his total. Yeah,
68%.
That's extrapolated over the whole game, so it can't change from per game to per 40 minutes. So
extrapolation.
Yeah. Math majors, not actually. But yeah, and he looks great. He looks confident, and I think confidence is a huge key for him. And I feel like this plays a little bit to Joey Baker as well, but confidence is really key for those two guys, especially in Wendell. In this context, he's being put in a position where he's surrounded by the right pieces to maximize his skill set, and he has enough shooters and enough slashers and a big guy, and 2 big guys, but specifically Paolo, a big guy who can run the floor and handle and take some of the pressure off him, and he doesn't need to handle it all the time. you could call Wendell Moore a role player. Like, he fills his role as doing everything.
Exactly.
Rebounding, passing, defending. I mean, his defense technically is not as good as it was last year. His defensive rating is 89, and last year was a 103. That's a pretty small sample size, and that won't hold up over time. He's a great defender. He's long. He can switch. He's like one of the main. Him and Paolo are the two main guys that allow this team to switch everything with the small ball lineup. But yeah, he looks great. I mean, I feel I don't mean to. That wasn't disrespectful to call him a role player. I meant his role is that he does the most. If you combine all three main statistics, he does the most of those, and that's kind of his role, is to organize everything and get this team going on offense and defense. I think his defense will come as the season goes along. I think he's played pretty well defensively, but yeah, that's got to be the main takeaway. One thing I will say about Army, I think obviously Paolo has been great so far. He's averaging 19 a game and roughly 7 rebounds. So he looks great, but he needs 9 rebounds, 8.7. So I think against Army it showed he probably needs a little more touches inside. He only had 9 shot attempts, which is really weird.
He's yet to lead the team in shot attempts.
Yeah, which he's a very unselfish player. He cares. I talked to his high school coach for a feature on him, and he cares about winning. He said, I know a lot of guys say winning is not the main thing, it's the only thing, that type of thing. But he clearly is a very unselfish player, and he knows that the best way for this team to win is not for him to have to carry the offensive load, because they have so many scores. They have so many guys who can take their man off the dribble. And him only getting 9 shots, he should definitely be getting more. He should be getting 15 a night. He should be getting what they're doing really well, I think, is they're screening for him well down low. They're setting a lot of rub screens, but they got to give him the ball more inside in the post. And when he reposts, they got to get it back to them. Because they're kicking out. They haven't had. What's interesting is they have had some open guys on the perimeter, but they don't have a ton of catch and shoot attempts out of the post. I feel that might be a little anecdotal, but if that makes sense, they're not kicking it out and immediately shooting. They're looking to swing it, and they're doing a good job. The ball's not sticking a lot. They still could do a little better job. I think they had under 10 assists against Kentucky, which was more of a case of Keels kind of taking over and Paolo going to work at the high post. But I think they need to give it to him a little more. And when they swing it and when they rotate it and they move the ball and drive, they have to look for him again, maybe on the lob or maybe inside in the post. So those are the two takeaways. Is Paolo, even though he had nine touches, he had 18 and 12. So he's ridiculous. So I know people say Chet Holmgren should be the number 1 pick. I think Chet is a great player. I think he's the second best freshman in college basketball. I think Paolo's the first, and I think his skill set translates a little better to the NBA than Chet. But yeah, we are getting ready to wrap this up. We obviously we're not really going to talk much about Duke's next game on Tuesday, but does anything about this first stretch change your opinion about this team? And if so, what changes?
I'll say I thought that the Kentucky game was really impressive and set the tone for. I think that will be definitely a tone setter for the rest of especially the non-conference season. I haven't been as optimistic about this team's potential as I thought I would be at this point. I thought we'd be seeing 30-point, 40-point wins against Army and Campbell. Maybe I'm underestimating. Campbell is a good team, but there's just so many little things I could put my finger on that says Duke's not that good at X, Y, and Z. I think there's a lot of those little things in terms of just where guys are on the floor, just how everybody's playing together. But in the end, Duke has a bunch of really talented guys, and I have faith that they'll be able to pull it together and start really really connecting at a point where they can be blowing everybody out of the water.
If I have to give a binary answer to the question, I'd say no. Duke, my expectations for Duke are right where they were a week ago. But my expectations for how they're going to get to that point, which I think is a very high point, I think they'll be a top 10 team all season. Hopefully they'll stay within that top 10 of the rankings, but I think they'll be like a top 10 team in college basketball throughout. I think it's going to take some time, like I said. I think it's going to happen speed bumps. Wouldn't be surprised if we see a tough loss early on. They've got some tough games coming up. I'm trying my hardest to reserve judgment until the Gonzaga versus Ohio State stretch. Kentucky was a great win, and they gutted it out, but we're not really going to learn a ton about Duke over the course of these next few games against non-conference teams until we get to see them against some high-level competition, because they're really talented. They're going to beat these teams like they beat Campbell last night, whether it's super pretty or not, and hopefully they learn to not place down to their competition's level because they are the better team in all of these matchups. But it's been good so far. Wendell's emergence is fantastic for the team, and we'll see how things play out moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't change a lot for me. I think Coach K did a pretty good job of adjusting last night, and I think that definitely stood out to me. That's one thing that probably I took note of, is him being able to adjust on the fly. He's always done a good job of that, but him doing it this early in the season was notable. I mean, this is still I know they have a lot of talent, and they do have some returning talent, but this is still overall a young team, and he'll have to recalibrate with lineups and rotation. And I mean, I think their rotation is 9 guys. We haven't really gotten into the rotation that much, but it's 9 guys, and Bates Jones sometimes plays. He could be the 10th guy, depending on matchup, whether they want to space the floor a little bit and maybe have an extra guy on the glass. But yeah, I think it's clear they have the nine guys in the rotation. They've tinkered a little with the small ball, which I thought they would do, maybe a little more. I didn't think they would do it for the entire game, but it kind of was a necessity last night. And it doesn't change that much. I still think they're going to win the ACC. I still view them as a top 10 team. I still view them maybe with the potential to be a top 5 team. I think they've shown their peak, but they've also shown their valley, and I think there's a bigger gap. There's a bigger gap between those two. Maybe last year, I think this team is definitely a lot more consistent, obviously, and even 2 years ago, that team I think this team fits well. This team might have that team was 25-6, the 2019-2020 team, but I thought it was a weird, interesting fit. I don't know. Obviously Trey Jones was the engine, and Vernon Carey I thought was a very underappreciated player for what he did. That has to do with who was wearing his number the year before. But I think the team is well constructed in my opinion. I think Coach K and the staff and John Shire and everyone has done a good job of putting together this team and building. Defense looks really good. They didn't give up any threes in the second half, and they made some adjustments. Campbell was running a lot of back doors, but it doesn't change a lot. I predicted 27-4. I'm going to stick with that. I don't see no team in college basketball has really shocked me, positively or negatively. They have Gonzaga in less than 2 weeks. And Gonzaga obviously took it to Texas last night. Rough Saturday for Texas, but
very tough.
Yeah. That's obviously the game. That UCLA, Villanova, Gonzaga, UCLA, Duke, Gonzaga are the 3 biggest games of the non-conference slate, I would say. So if you guys are guessing a line for Duke Gonzaga, what would it be?
I think Gonzaga was favored by 7 last night over Texas. Okay. They made short work of that, and they're usually favored by a lot of points. Gonzaga will be favored.
Yeah.
And I think you got to look at the Gonzaga UCLA matchup between now and then. That's the marquee matchup of the year, probably.
Yeah. It'll be 1 versus 2, probably.
Yeah, which is not something you see most years.
Yeah.
But if Gonzaga can even win that game by just a few points, they should be favored by just around where they were against Texas. they win games, and they win games by a lot of points. So Duke, lines are weird. I would expect Duke to maybe cover because I think they can hang with Gonzaga. I think they match up well. And I think it'll be a really good game, but Gonzaga will be favored by 6-7 points. Yeah.
I would say 4.5.
Yeah,
5.
I'm with Max on that one. Again, I'm not going to be betting on this game, but I think a 4.5, 5.5 kind of range around there is a safe.
Yeah. We're not going to get too deep into the weeds with gambling, but obviously do not gamble. But I just think we have to note that Gonzaga will definitely be favored going into that game, as they should be. They're the best team in the country. They were 1 game away from going undefeated, and they brought back one of I thought Corey Kispert was their most important player, but Drew Timme was right there along with Jalen Suggs, and they brought him back, and they had the best freshman recruit in the country. They're the number one by the rating system, and they brought in Hunter Salas, Nolan Hickman, Andrew Nemhard has really stepped up for them. He's taken on a bigger role without Suggs. I'm so excited for that Gonzaga UCLA game. That's kind of the prelude to. I guess for us covering Duke, it's the prelude to Duke Gonzaga. But
I will be watching.
That is the biggest game of the year, and that probably will be the biggest game until the NCAA tournament, probably. Besides Duke UNC, which those are obviously the highest rated games.
But in terms of profile, it's definitely
UCLA. And UCLA, that was an incredible win against Villanova. They were down 10 in the second half to a great team, and Justin Moore and Colin Gillespie were punishing them from deep, and they were moving the ball really well, and they just stayed the course and slowed it down with Juzang and Jaime Jaquez and Tiger Campbell, he's not their best player. I think it might be similar to Wendell Moore. He might be their engine, their most important player. Great hair, too. Great hair.
I'm glad somebody else thinks that because I love Tiger Campbell.
Yeah, big fan. That's all we had for today. We obviously have we'll be live from Cameron Indoor Stadium on Tuesday night for Duke's game against Gardner-Webb, another non-conference game against a mid-major. So we'll be live from Cameron Tuesday night. Make sure to tune into DukeChronicle.com for all of our coverage as we kind of get into the thick of the non-conference slate, and we'll be there every step of the way, for this season, and it's gotten off to an interesting start, and we're excited for the rest of the year. I know I am. So, guys, thanks for joining, and hope you guys can come back.
Thanks, Max.
All right, thanks for tuning in, guys.